Today, we're digging into a hidden cost, one that's being quietly taken out of your family's budget every single week. It's a number that tells a story about a massive shift in how our country is run. And believe me, it's costing you a lot more than you probably think. $117. Yep, that's it. Based on our deep dive into government data, that's the weekly price tag for the growth in government overhead since 2008. And that's for every single household. You can think of it as a bureaucracy tax. And it's about time we all understood exactly what we're paying for. So where is all that money going? Well, the answer really goes back to one critical decision made over a decade ago. It was a turning point that completely changed the way our public service works. This is really a tale of two competing ideas, two totally different blueprints for how to run a country. You see, before 2008, the government's whole mantra was competition. The idea was to stay lean by outsourcing work and, this is really crucial, by unbundling huge projects into smaller chunks that local and regional businesses could actually bid on. But then, in 2008, everything changed. There was this major pivot. The focus shifted inward, toward building what they called internal capability. In plain English, growing the government to do a lot more of the work itself. And this chart just lays the difference bare, doesn't it? On one side, you've got government acting like a manager, trying to be efficient, treating citizens like customers. On the other side, government as the builder, focused on creating its own expertise and bundling all those contracts into massive megaprojects that only the biggest companies could ever hope to win. So you have to ask, did this shift to an in-house, bundled model actually get better results? Well, the numbers tell a pretty shocking story. Since that big pivot in 2008, the public service has just ballooned. We're talking about nearly 60,000 more people. And the cost to just run the government departments, the sheer overhead, has more than doubled, from $48 billion to a projected $112 billion. And this had a direct, measurable impact on major projects. Before 2008, cost blowouts averaged around 11%. After the shift, that figure shot up, more than doubling to over 23%. We've all seen this with huge projects like Snowy 2.0 and the Inland Rail, where the initial budgets became, well, a distant memory. And it wasn't just a cost blowout either, it was a time blowout. That 23.5% figure means that these vital projects, the things our economy depends on, are falling almost a quarter behind schedule. And here's a massive clue as to why this is happening. The Grattan Institute found that 3/4 of these huge cost overruns came from projects that were announced with a big press conference before anyone had actually done the detailed homework. It points to a culture of announce now, figure out the details later. Okay, so you've got a rapidly growing public service and projects that are constantly over budget. That creates a massive bill. And, well, that bill has to be paid by someone. As the data shows, the government has quietly but very decisively shifted the burden right onto you. Think about this. In 2008, your personal income tax made up 44% of all government revenue. Today, it's 50%. Half. The load has been systematically moved from other sources and placed more and more on the shoulders of individual wage earners. So this creates a really clear chain of events. The decision to grow the government's internal machine led to higher running costs and massive project blowouts. And to cover those costs, the government turned to the most reliable source of income it has, your paycheck. And it's not just income tax. What the government calls other revenue, things like fines, fees, and charges, that has also more than doubled. These aren't just little administrative fees. They're an increasingly important tool being used to plug the budget holes this inefficiency creates. All of this brings us right back to that fork in the road we mentioned at the start, that choice between two very, very different ways of doing things. So let's just quickly recap the evidence. The big pivot away from a competitive, outsourced model came with a really steep price tag, a doubling of departmental costs, a sharp drop in project efficiency, and a much heavier burden on your wallet. This is that $117 a week bureaucracy tax in action. So at the end of the day, the question isn't whether building internal capability is a good idea in theory. The question is one of value. At a cost of $117 a week out of your family's pocket, is the current model delivering a service that's twice as good and twice as efficient as it was before? The data suggests it's a question we really need to start asking.